sermonette today that I want to give you, it will relate to the sermon which I'll be giving a little later on. I've entitled the sermonette Early Christianity, and it's partly scriptural but partly non-scriptural as well. The reason being that the scriptures cease to speak after a certain point in the history of the church. Early Christianity is about the history of the first 300 years of Christianity. And the history revolves in several distinct segments. According to Wikipedia, the encyclopedia, on the article Early Christianity, Wikipedia says the following. Early Christianity is generally reckoned by church historians to begin with the ministry of Jesus. It says then 27 to 30 year AD, 27 to the year AD 30, starting in that period of time. Doesn't give us a more specific date than that, but it says that, although it comes back later in the article to contradict that a little bit. But it's generally reckoned by church historians, and historians write history oftentimes according to Mr. Frank Duckel, what they would like to see said. And so it's always good to take any historical account with a grain of salt, because it's always written by men. Well, not always. God has written some history in his Bible too, hasn't he? And with the first council, and ends with the first council of Nicaea in 325. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things, but we can only talk about a few things that happened in a 300 year period roughly. Ending, it says, with the Council of Nicaea in 325. It is typically divided into two periods. The Apostolic Era. What is the Apostolic Era? Well, we'll talk about that again in a minute. And I lost my place. It's in small font here. The Apostolic Age, which is 30 to 100 AD, when the first apostles were still alive. And secondly, the Ante Nicene period, which goes from the year 100 AD to the year 325. And so those two periods are considered to be distinctly different periods. The first one being the Apostolic Age, and the second one being the Ante-Nicene period. And so I'd like to just bring you up to date a little bit on those three early periods of Christianity. Let's look at the apostles. Take a few minutes and look here at the Apostolic Age. Beginning, it says, in 27 to 30 AD, with the start of Christ's ministry. When did the Apostolic Age start? Well, Matthew seems to give it one starting time, and Luke seems to give it a different starting time. Matthew, and of course you remember the face of the lion, Christ being the king, lion being a symbol of the king. Well, Matthew begins his account of Christ as the king, and he opens up by talking about the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5. It's about the Sermon on the Mount. And the first part of the Sermon on the Mount is the Beatitudes. Blessed are, and there's, I think, 8 different blessings that are pronounced there in the Beatitudes, or the attitudes which we need to have in Christianity. And I think you can see a parallel between those time periods, or those Beatitudes, and the attitudes that we see manifested on the holy days. But anyway, according to Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, which are the Beatitudes, really, according to Matthew, are the foundational attitudes that we need to have in Christianity. Christ spoke those things, and then goes on to give the rest of the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, which is taking up some 3 chapters. So that's Matthew's account of the beginning. On the other hand, Luke gives this account of the beginning of Christianity. Seems to me this would be the beginning. Luke chapter 4. Of course, in the earlier part of Luke, it talks about the birth of Christ and all of those things which had to do with his family. Luke being the face of the man. Those human characteristics and traits which would be a part of the things we would consider as family of those of us who have such family. Well, Christ is all accounted for in that way by the book of Luke, not by any of the other books, but the book of Luke gives us that account, because Luke is what? The face of the man, humanity. Here's what it says in Luke chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Now, here it says, Jesus, being full of the Holy Spirit, returned from Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted by the devil, and in those days he ate nothing, and when they were ended, he afterward hungered. So he began his ministry. Christianity started with his ministry in around the year 30 AD, 27 AD, and he began it with a fasting period of 40 days, and afterwards he was hungered. Well, it goes on to give the account there, but that's where the apostolic age seems to begin, and it ends in the year, according to Wikipedia, 100. And of course, I'm sure they're sort of grasping at straws. It's not very certain, according to everyone. You know, some might have a different year than others, but in the 90s AD was the end of the apostolic age, somewhere in there. And John the Apostle was the one who was the last writer of a book of the Bible that was written by John, the book of Revelation, when he was on the Isle of Patmos in exile, and he was taken in spirit to see great heavenly visions, and he was told to record those visions, and that's the last thing that was written in the apostolic age. So it says here in Revelation chapter 1, verse 11, this voice said, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. What you see, write in a book. Send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia and unto the Laodiceans. And we've often looked at those as though they are a litany or a series of time periods that these 7 churches were reflecting in the sequence as of a mail route, where there were 7 churches that had a mail route delivered to them. And so that is the end. Just trying to get you to capture and understand a little bit of the time period of Christianity and the distinct periods of Christianity. The first distinct period of Christianity is the apostolic age, beginning with either the Sermon on the Mount or with Christ going up and fasting for 40 days and confronting Satan the devil, and then going out and spending the next 3.5 years with his ministry. So that was the first and really first distinct period that the apostolic age appeared in. Ante-Nicene period. Does anyone know what ante-Nicene means? I meant to look that up before I came, but I don't know either. It is, though, the period of time when they write about ante-Nicene. I know what the period of time is. It's from 100 AD, when the last of the apostolic age was written, until the year 325, which is the year that Constantine conquered Rome and began modern Christianity. So the ante-Nicene period, I'll try to look that up and correct my failure the next time I'm here. The ante-Nicene period, I think ante means after.
It's just the period after the Council of Nicaea.
After what?
The Council of Nicaea. That's all it means. The period of time after the Council of Nicaea.
After the Council of Nicaea.
Or sorry, before.
Before the period. Yeah, because the Council of Nicaea was in 325.
Period before.
Yeah. So the church grew, believe it or not, after I read you some things I'm going to read you. The church grew for 225 years, from 100 to 325, and went through several, and I'm going to read you something here that says 10 persecutions, according to Fox's Book of Martyrs. There are horrible persecutions. So I'm going to read you here what it says from page 12 in this Book of Martyrs by John Fox, and it's written by or published by the Whitaker House. And I've had this book. It was a gift from Marcus and Anita Strange to Hazel and myself since the 13th of February in 1997. Pages are getting a little bit yellow, but nevertheless, the information remains spotless. So let's look here at what it says happened during this ante-Nicene period. I'm just going to give you one small event. There are others. I plan to speak later on after I give today's sermon and in the future about the Quartodeciman controversy. And so this is sort of helps to set up today's sermon. Today's sermon is an attempt to set up the Quartodeciman controversy. Here on page 12 in this book, talking about the first martyrdom of Christianity, it says in here there were 10 martyrdoms during the ante-Nicene period. The cruelness of the tormentors, such was the number of these constant saints that suffered, or rather such was the power of the Lord in his saints, that as Jerome says, there was no day in the whole year unto which the number of 5,000 martyrs cannot be ascribed, except only the first day of January. I don't know why they didn't martyr people on the first day of January. Maybe they were too busy having other celebrations. But according to this, there was a martyrdom for a year, every day of the year of at least 5,000 people. So how many people does that come up with? I don't know how they could keep count of that, especially in those days, but that's what Justin had said. And Fox is just following what he had read from Justin. There is no day in the whole year unto which the number of 5,000 martyrs can be ascribed except January 1. The first of these 10 persecutions was stirred up by Nero. Now this predates the ante-Nicene period. The first persecution was in the year 64, according to this. Nero is famous for having fiddled while Rome burned in that time and blaming it on the Christians. That led to the first great persecution of Christians. The tyrannous rage of which emperor was very fierce against the Christians, insomuch as Eusebius recorded, a man might see cities full of men's bodies, the old there lying together with the young, and the dead bodies of women cast out naked, without all reverence of that sex, in the open streets. Many there were of the Christians in those days who, seeing the filthy abominations and intolerable cruelty of Nero, thought that he was the Antichrist. That was the first of 10 persecutions of Christians at that time. And so the ante-Nicene period was a period of conflict, both between religious groups and also between the government of Rome and the Christian churches of the time. And that started in the year 100, according to this, although that first persecution, it says, was in the year 64. And it continued until 325, when Constantine conquered Rome, and Bryant has said was the period of the first Council of Nicaea. And then in 325, we came to what is known as modern Christianity. Up until modern Christianity, well, all through the apostolic age, first of all, the church believed and followed the writings of the New Testament. Then in the ante-Nicene period, and there was a lot of conflict, a lot of what is called Gnosticism creeping into the church and corrupting and changing all of the doctrines of the church and inserting in their place doctrines of pagan gods. That's what happened. How did we get to the confusion that we call the modern church today? Well, that's when it began. in the modern era, 325, and it was an amalgamation. And the amalgamation is like the mixing of the different religions together until they came out with one brand of Christianity, which was not Christian at all. That happened in the year 325. Up until the year 325, the Christian church kept the seventh-day Sabbath. Up until that time, the church was keeping the holy days of God. And when we talk about in the future, hopefully talk about the Quartodeciman controversy, we'll be talking about one belief, one holy day of the Church of God, and seeing how that changed. But modern Christianity began in 325 when the Emperor Constantine formed an alliance with the Roman Catholic Pope. Modern Christianity continues from that time up until today with the assimilation of pagan religions into false Christianity. Of particular note, Constantine and the Pope changed the day of worship from the Sabbath to Sunday, which was to them known as, and the name still carries on to this day, the Venerable Day of the Sun. That's the reason it's called Sunday. It seems like it's a very overly simplified thing, but no, that exactly reflects what the first day of the week was, the day of worshiping the sun, the Sunday. Paul writes in Romans 1, verse 25, about those pagans, or the assimilation of those pagans, which was already beginning, had already gone on for some time, even before Christ was born, who changed, Paul says in Romans 1 and verse 25, who changed, that is, they, the Greeks and the Romans, changed the truth of God into a lie and worshipped and served the creation more than the Creator. Is worshiping the Son, worshiping the creation more than the Creator. Paul then concludes that verse of Scripture with the statement that who is blessed forever, the Creator who is blessed forever. This is a broad outline of the history of the three historical periods of Christianity.